Now, the world is rocked by protests against racism and discrimination. And in the line of fire are symbols of racism, statues and icons. They're being taken down. What does such a protest achieve, you may ask? It's just a way to make a point, an unlawful way, but a very powerful way. The toppling of a statue, just like the planting of a flag, can be an important marker in history, an event that denotes a shift in power. Let me give you some examples. Starting with Iraq, this is 2003. The American invasion of Iraq marked by the toppling of Saddam Hussein's statue. The bronze structure fell straight to the ground in broad daylight in capital Baghdad, marking the end of dictatorship and the beginning of a new story. Let's come to Beijing. 1989, Tiananmen Square, the statue of the goddess of democracy fell, and with it fell all hopes of democracy in China. Then we have Afghanistan, 2001, the demolition of the Bamia Buddha, symbolizing Taliban oppression and the reign of terror. So here's my point. The toppling of a statue is not just a revolt against history. It's also the making of history. And history is exactly what is being written right now. The world is rising against racism and attacking everything that stands for racism. Structures built on the foundations of hate and slavery, they're all being taken down, one after another. In London, the statue of a slave trader was taken down. His name was Robert Milligan. He was a merchant who owned 526 slaves in Jamaica. Why was his statue standing tall outside a London museum in the first place? Because he helped in founding some of the key institutions of Imperial Britain. For the money that he paid, Milligan's links to slavery and his racist history were whitewashed, just like it was in the case of Winston Churchill or Edward Colston, another slave trader. Both these statues were defaced in England. Colston's statue was toppled and dragged through the streets of Bristol. It was then thrown in the water. These images speak volumes. This is a movement against racism that is exposing the skeletons of the past. Countries across the world are facing a difficult question today. How do you define history? Which parts of history should have a place in heritage? Should structures of hate be toppled, or should they be preserved as heritage? These are uncomfortable questions, sometimes politically incorrect questions, but it's time that the world face them. Thousands in the United Kingdom have chosen sides. These are images from Oxford. Protesters gathered outside an Oxford college. They want the statue of Cecil Rhodes to be taken down. And you may have heard of the Rhodes Scholarship. This is the same Rhodes. Many in India proudly say they're Rhodes Scholars. Well, Cecil Rhodes was an imperialist and a racist. His inheritance funds scholarships to Oxford every year. Protesters do not want him to be celebrated anymore. Then we have Robert Clive, a key figure in the East India Company. He's celebrated in Britain for his role in the imperial domination of India. But his domination of millions of people on the grounds of race and race alone is often brushed under the carpet. Thousands are demanding the removal of this statue of Robert Clive from Shrewsbury. Demonstrators supporting the Black Lives Matter movement have listed 60 statues, and this is in Britain alone. Their demand is very simple. They say these structures, these statues of racism must go. In the United States, protesters have torn down a statue of Christopher Columbus. This was in Virginia. The statue of Columbus was set on fire and thrown into a lake. The cheering protesters said Columbus represents genocide. And why just structures? There are other symbols. The US Navy has made an important announcement. They may rename ports and bases named after Confederate leaders. The Confederate flag persists as a symbol of racism. Let me give you a bit of history. A group of 11 states, known as the Confederate States of America, seceded from the United States in the 1860s. They broke ranks because they wanted to continue to enslave millions of African Americans. It ended with the US Civil War. More than 500,000 people died. America is prepared to let go of these symbols of slavery. What about India? India is dotted with symbols and statues that glorify imperialist and racist individuals. Will India demolish these symbols? The 200 years of British rule were marked by oppression, racism, prejudice, domination. Why is India still living with the symbols of this dark era? 72 years after independence, the Victoria Memorial still celebrates the Queen of England. It is also a reminder of how Bengal and all of India suffered under her rule. Almost all the streets of Langford town in the city of Bengaluru are named after imperial leaders. There are entire cities named after them. How do you think Dalhousie got its name? The Himalayan city is named after Lord Dalhousie, who was the Governor General of India from the year 1838 to 1849. That was 171 years ago. Lansdowne in Uttarakhand, another example of India's colonial hangover. Fort St. George in Chennai, a reminder of the British Raj, symbols of imperial pomp, which were imposed on India just like the British rule. Statues of rulers, generals and British civil servants were erected across India. Many of them faced the wrath of angry Indians too. In 1896, the statue of Queen Victoria was daubed in tar. In 1908, another Victoria statue was vandalized in Nagpur. In the 1930s, people demanded that a memorial to the Black Hole tragedy be removed. After independence, people asked, why should the symbols of the Raj stay? The Bombay Municipal Corporation adopted a resolution in 1947. All busts and statues of imperial figures were to be replaced by those of Indians. In recent years, many imperial structures have either been removed or placed in museums. Some have been sent abroad, but many still remain, as do colonial names. Today, Britons have spoken out against their own queen. A statue of Victoria has been attacked in Leeds. And I'm not justifying or promoting vandalism. My question is very simple. Isn't it time India bid goodbye to every symbol of racism and oppression?